Welcome to Kubrick Quest Episode 10. Today we'll be talking about Stanley Kubrick's 10th feature film, Barry Lyndon, which came out in 1975. Like most of Kubrick's movies, this was based on a book, which was the 1844 novel The Luck of Barry Lyndon by William Makepeace Thackeray. If you watch Stanley Kubrick's movies in order, as I've been doing for this Kubrick Quest series, Barry Lyndon really stands out because of how it fits into the timeline of his filmography. After A Clockwork Orange, he makes Barry Lyndon, which, if you've seen Barry Lyndon, it could not be stylistically farther away from A Clockwork Orange. One is raw, rough, in your face, and has this manic energy that never lets up. And the other is prim and proper and controlled and restrained and other words like that. So, what's it about? Barry Lyndon is about this guy named Barry Lyndon, and stuff happens to him. No, but for real, his real name is Redmond Barry, and the story is divided into two parts. Part 1 is how he became to be known as Barry Lyndon. When the movie starts, he's in his late teens or early 20s and comes from a middling-class Irish family who's been having some financial struggles lately. Besides the good reputation of his family's name, he really doesn't have any skills or life experience in general, and it's kind of a dweeb. One day, his cousin gets a little flirty with him, after which he becomes romantically obsessed with her. This obsession soon turns to jealous rage as she's courted by an older, well-to-do British captain. After the British captain proposes to his cousin, Barry's jealousy grows to the point where he challenges him to a duel. Barry wins the duel and kills the captain. I say kills in quotes because he didn't really kill the captain, because the whole duel was a setup and it was to make Barry think that he won, then he has to be on the run from the law. The whole thing was really just a scheme to get him to leave town. Now Barry's on his own in the world, on the run for killing a man in a duel, or so he thinks, and the first thing Barry does on his own is to get tricked by these bandits. He's robbed of everything except his boots, which they let him keep out of pity. So, not off to a great start. Barry then joins the British Army. He seems to actually be decent at military life and fits in as a soldier. He engages in some friendly shit-talking with this other guy.
Mr. Toole, why did you hide so yesterday when Mrs. Toole came to visit you? You afraid of getting your ears boxed?
Yo, how are you calling me Napoleon Dynamite when you just straight up Napoleon?
And they get into a fist fight, and Barry actually seems to have skills in hand-to-hand fighting. He's having a good time in the British Army until he runs into an old family friend, Captain Grogan, who informs Barry that the captain who he thought he shot in a duel isn't dead, and the whole thing is rigged so Barry would run away and his cousin would then marry the wealthy captain. I'd be kind of pissed if I were him. Family friend Grogan is killed in battle. Barry then runs away and deserts the British Army. He then has a brief affair with a German peasant widow. One day, while he's still wearing his British Army uniform, Barry encounters some Prussian soldiers and is questioned by their leader, Captain Potzdorf, who is immediately suspicious. Barry doesn't want to get caught as a deserter for fleeing his army, so he starts making up any excuses and reasons he can think of to Captain Potzdorf for an explanation as to why this British soldier is all the way out in Prussia land on his own. But Potzdorf is clever and soon catches Barry in his lie and impresses him into the Prussian army. Barry ends up saving Potzdorf's life in a battle and is awarded a medal. In addition to being awarded a medal, Barry is given a special secret mission by the Prussian army. They want him to gather intel and spy on this guy, the Chevalier de Balebachy, who's a suspected spy. I can't do that. The Chevalier speaks English, and while working under him, Barry, a stranger in a strange land at this point, is so moved by hearing his native tongue that he confesses everything to the Chevalier. The two connect and start working together, making money by scamming people in card games. After spending some time scamming people with the Chevalier, Barry decides that the only way for him to move up in life and society without actually doing any real hard work is to marry a rich widow. So he finds one, named Lady Lyndon. They marry, he takes her name, and now he's known as Barry Lyndon. That was all part 1. Part 2 is about his downfall from there, and how he loses the new assumed name/title of Barry Lyndon. After Barry and Lady Lyndon marry, and he has gained wealth and status in society without actually doing any work, fortune smiled upon him. The odds were not against him, but somehow he pulled off his whole scheme here. You think he would clean up his act a little bit. You think he would start to try and be a better person to hold on to this good fortune he has found in life as long as he can, right? Well, no. He still acts like an ass and drinks and smokes and parties and spends large amounts of the Lyndon family money. Lady Lyndon's son from her previous marriage, the young Lord Bullingdon, sees Barry as nothing but a gold digger, and the two have an awful relationship. The only person Barry seems to be truly good towards is his one biological son with Lady Lyndon named Brian Patrick. Barry adores Brian and spoils him, but Brian unfortunately dies from injuries he sustained while riding a fully grown horse unsupervised. Brian's death hits the family hard. From there, things get worse. Barry spends more of the family's money and drinks more. Lady Lyndon gets more depressed and actually tries to end her own life at one point. Eventually, the young Lord Bullingdon now has had enough and challenges Barry to a duel in which Barry gets shot in the leg. While recovering, Lord Bullingdon makes a deal to pay Barry to stay away from Lady Lyndon and his family and their estate and England for the rest of his life. He's had enough with them. He's done. Barry accepts. He leaves. The end. I read a couple of reviews from when the movie first came out, and a number of critics described the way the movie's writing and how it handles its characters as emotionally cold and distant. I kinda have to agree with them. Roger Ebert said Barry Lyndon was technically awesome, emotionally distant, and classically Kubrick, which is probably the best summary I could think of for this movie. Regarding Barry as a character, a weird comparison I want to make that popped into my head when I was watching this is that he kind of reminds me of someone like Saul from Better Call Saul. One scene, you'd be on his side and want him to succeed. And then when he does succeed, he does something mean or selfish or stupid, and then you're not on his side again. Barry can't see past his own personal character flaws, and often doesn't act in his own best interest. In a sense, just makes him human. But in another sense, this is a movie, and you should kind of want to be on the side of your main character, the guy you're following for over 3 hours. Or else by the time the big showdown duel happens at the end of the movie, I find myself thinking, go on, shoot Barry. I don't care if I can kill him. He's a jerk. Another observation I had about Barry's character and the writing of the movie in general is that he just kind of drifted through life. He's here, and then he's there. He joins this army, joins another army. He's into this lady, and then this lady, and then this lady. I found myself asking, what does Barry want? Does he have any real moral core, or is he just all about self-preservation? I'm leaning more towards that. I described this movie to a friend recently as Shit Happens to Barry, the movie. Coincidentally, the Roger Ebert review also said something similar. He is a man to whom things happen. At some point, I started to think that we're not supposed to be on Barry's side, which isn't unusual for a Kubrick movie, because he usually writes his movies in a way where the audience acts as like a cold observer to the characters on screen, but I think he went a little too far with the cold observer stuff in this one. An example I want to point to of some of what I feel is the emotional vacancy in the movie's writing and the script is the part in the movie where Barry meets Lady Lyndon and courts her and marries her. He decides, I need a rich wife. And suddenly, there's Lady Lyndon walking by. In one scene, he's just staring at her like a weirdo. The next scene, they start making out. And then the next scene, part 2 has already begun and they're married. All this time, Lady Lyndon, the character, barely has any lines, at least none that stood out that I can remember. We, as the audience, are just watching things happen. Plot-wise, I think Barry Lyndon had the lowest stakes of any Kubrick movie. The fate of the world wasn't in question like Dr. Strangelove. The nature of the universe and existence wasn't mysteriously explored like in 2001. There was no big gun battle, no scandalous love affair, no big sack of money involved. A movie doesn't have to have some of those plot lines I just gave out as an example. But in the absence of a really engaging plot, all you really have to focus on are the characters. And if you don't care too much about the characters, then you don't really care too much about what happens to them and the movie in general. One kind of feeds into the other. In terms of pacing, the closest Kubrick movie I can compare this to is 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you're familiar with that movie, you know how meticulous, methodical, and restrained that pace is. Barry Lyndon is also slow, which isn't inherently a bad thing if you're going for a slow burn movie where the tension gradually ramps up and something crazy happens, like in the last act of 2001. But in the case of Barry Lyndon, the pacing just makes it feel slow. There's no giant crazy reward in the third act. Oh, the guys are coming over Saturday night? Sweet, I'll go put on the new 4K release of Barry Lyndon. We're gonna go crazy. I guarantee you no one has ever said that sentence. An example of the pace where you feel like the tension should be really high at this point in the movie was the final duel scene. I feel like that went on way longer than it had to. I have a little fan theory in my head as to why Barry Lyndon looks and feels the way it does. Kubrick originally really wanted to make a movie about Napoleon. He did an extensive amount of research, including reading, writing, storyboarding, gathering period-accurate costumes, and even location scouting. There was another Napoleon movie that came out in 1970 called Waterloo that did poorly at the box office, which caused Kubrick's financial backers for his Napoleon movie to pull out. The failure to launch for Kubrick's Napoleon project caused him to make Clockwork Orange instead. Kubrick also initially had his mind set on a different book by Barry Lyndon's author called Vanity Fair, but decided against it. It seems Barry Lyndon wasn't his first or even apparently second choice for what he wanted to do for his next movie, and I can't help but wonder that if Stanley Kubrick, being the control freak he was known to be, someone really used to getting his way all the time, was a little butthurt. Maybe he really wasn't that excited or inspired to start this project in general. In support of this little theory of mine, I found a quote from Stanley Kubrick in an old interview article where he's talking about the use of voiceover in Barry Lyndon. A voiceover spares you the cumbersome business of telling the necessary facts of the story through expositional dialogue scenes, which can become very tiresome and frequently unconvincing. Now, I'm not Stanley Kubrick, but my initial reaction to that quote is, isn't all of what he just described just called making a movie? You know, finding interesting creative ways to tell the story on screen, to convey information about the characters and the plot and the themes to the audience without having a voiceover literally tell you who this person is, where they're from, what they're thinking, where they're going. You know, it's that whole show, don't tell mantra. Now let's say something good about the movie. So say what you want about the writing or the pacing, but no one can admit that this movie does not look gorgeous. The visuals are the best thing about it by far. If you've seen my Minority Report book versus movie video, I made a comment saying that halfway through that movie, I just didn't enjoy looking at it anymore because it was all washed out and gross looking. Well, Barry Lyndon is the exact opposite of that. 3 of the 4 Oscars that this movie won were for Best Costume Design, Art Direction, and Cinematography. Sometimes I didn't mind the slower pace because the shots were just so well composed with vivid colors and everything was in focus that it looked like some kind of classical painting. In fact, a number of the most famous shots in the movie were inspired by paintings. Instead of going into all of them in detail, I found some people on YouTube had already done all that work, so I'll show a few examples here and then leave a full link to their videos in the description if you want to check them out, which you should if you're into this because they're pretty cool. Besides all the well-composed shots in the movie, Barry Lyndon is also considered a technical masterpiece because of its lighting. Most of all the shots in the movie were done with all natural lighting and without any electrical studio lights that you usually use on a movie set. Kubrick wanted the movie to look and feel different than other artificially lit costume dramas of the time. Barry Lyndon's unique look was achieved through a very special camera lens called the Carl Zeiss Planar 50mm f/0.7. Planar? I don't know. Gotta get into some film camera nerd terms here for a second to explain why this lens is so special. This lens had the lowest f-stop ever in film history and was originally designed by Zeiss for NASA to use on the Apollo moon missions. Only 10 of these lenses were ever made. 6 went to NASA, 1 was kept by Zeiss, and the remaining 3 were apparently purchased by Stanley Kubrick. This special lens allowed them to shoot scenes lit entirely by candlelight, which was basically not thought possible until they did it. Candles produce light, but not that much light, at least nowhere near the amount you'd need for a properly lit movie shot on film. If you ever shot things on film, you know what I'm talking about. This special lens technology gave Barry Lyndon such a unique look because back in the day, all they had were candles, so in theory, this movie looks exactly like any particular scene would really look way back when. Another thing that makes this movie look so fabulous are the sets. They're fancy, regal, grand, opulent, and really suit the mood the movie's going for. Sometimes it just lingers on a shot, and you don't mind because just look at that. Would you look at that? Take it all in. The costumes, the camera angle, the camera lens, the lighting, the elaborate sets. This movie feels like a unique visual treat into a world that I would have never seen otherwise. As always, I like to close out with some random fun thoughts and observations that I had while watching the movie. So to start off, how long have playing cards look like that? Like the playing cards that we know nowadays. How long have they had that design to them? Probably a very long time, apparently.
I have taken the ribbon from around my neck and hidden it somewhere on my person. If you find it, you can have it. You are free to look for it anywhere you will, and I will think very little of you if you do not find it.
Where could my ribbon have gone? What an odd way of flirting. What is this awkward scene I'm watching here? I'm sorry, but that's just funny the way that guy's walking. Can I just have an infinite looping gif of that guy's walk?
Here's 10 guineas at your service.
10 guineas at your service. I feel like in The Sopranos, that line would have a very different meaning. Also, speaking of The Sopranos, the tutor to Lord Bullingdon and general religious advisor to Lady Lyndon sure does like spending a lot of time with Lady Lyndon. I wonder if anything is going on there. Also about the religious advisor / tutor to Lord Bullingdon, would you trust this guy around your kids? Look at him. Just look at him. No. No. What a stupid way to hold your pistols. Who does this? This is much more threatening, do like the gangster way or something, but like, what is this? I'm not scared of someone who does this. Is it just me, or does this character look like the handsome Squidward meme? Also, look at this cello here. It's got frets on it like a guitar. That's pretty cool. Haven't seen one of those. Well, that's about all I've got for today. If you stuck around to this point in the video, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always, and I will see you the next time on Kubrick Quest when we cover The Shining. So, till next time, goodbye.